BJ Mafia was popping. So the Kansas City Chiefs and the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're gonna be playing in a highly anticipated Week 2 matchup, a matchup that features two teams that faced off together last year in the AFC Divisional round, where the Jaguars ultimately lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs went on to go ahead and win the Super Bowl, and now the Jacksonville Jaguars, in their home opener, get to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't even need to put into words how highly anticipated this game has been and how much this could mean for the Jaguars, this Jaguars fan base, and the confidence and the momentum of this team moving forward going into this year, because this Kansas City Chiefs team since 2017 has been the best and most consistent team in the game of football. You've got a multiple-time MVP in Patrick Mahomes, undoubtedly and undisputably the best quarterback and the best player in the game of football in Patrick Mahomes, the best head coach in Andy Reid, a two-time Super Bowl winning team, a team that's been relentlessly to the AFC Championship game, a team that just consistently defies all odds. The Jaguars know they're going to have to run through Kansas City at some point this year, and it's going to start off early on in the season in Week 2. But Jags fans and Chiefs fans, like I do for every single preview and recap video, I always go ahead and I talk about the opponent first. That's going to come with the Kansas City Chiefs, and then I'll flip it over into talking about the Jaguars before I finally kind of wrap up the video talking about my final predictions and my final thoughts for this game this Sunday afternoon. But before I really start talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, let me tell you guys something right here, right now. If you guys have been following me on the channel now for an extended period of time, you guys know that I don't live in Jacksonville anymore. I live in Orlando, but this upcoming Friday, I will be heading back into town this weekend, but I unfortunately do not have any tickets to this game. I know that I'm still able to purchase tickets for this game, but I don't intend on being at this game as of right now, as I currently record this video. Now look, my impulsive self might be like, you know what, Sunday afternoon, I have to be there at this game. I can't miss this atmosphere. I have to see Patrick Mahomes and company. I gotta help lock down the bank, because I know the Jags fans are gonna go crazy. I'm about to go crazy. The West Side finna go crazy. So I know that I need to be out there, but as of right now, I don't have tickets to this game. I don't intend on going to the game, even though I wanna be there, but who knows, maybe things will change. Make sure you guys kind of stay up to date with me on Twitter about that. But Chiefs fans, Jags fans, let's actually kind of get into the preview aspect of this. Let me start talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. And the biggest thing we got to talk about with the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously outside of Patrick Mahomes, is with their injury report. Now, we know the Chiefs lost their first game of the season as the NFL season opener to the Detroit Lions at home at Arrowhead Stadium. They lost the game 20-21. That was a great game overall, but they had some key guys missing in that game, and most notably, it came with Chris Jones, who was holding out for a new contract. He just got his new contract. And then obviously Travis Kelce, the best tight end in all of football, arguably the GOAT of all tight ends in the history of football. He hyperextended his knee just a couple of days prior to the Chiefs and the Lions Week 1 matchup. So now Chris Jones, who has his new one-year contract, he's been getting back onto the field, and so has Travis Kelce, according to Andy Reid. But these guys have been taking limited reps in practice, so they're still monitoring that situation, and they're going to really kind of see on a day-to-day basis where Chris Jones is at when he's ramped up back into his football shape. Travis Kelce making sure that they don't rush him completely back, even though I personally expect Travis Kelce to go out there and still play in Week 2. I know that he was aching to go out there in Week 1 and play, but they ultimately sat him down and they didn't want to rush him back. Then you've got two other potential notable injuries when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's going to come with running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, former first-round pick, who's dealing with an illness as of right now, something that he's been dealing with now for an extended period of time, and also starting cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, who's been dealing with a lot of knee issues kind of dating back to training camp and throughout the preseason. It's kind of sat him out on the sidelines. And if they're missing two key players outside of just Chris Jones and Travis Kelce, guys like L'Jarius Sneed and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we know Isaiah Pacheco has given the Jaguars absolute hell last season, in the postseason, and in the regular season. But missing a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire to an offense that might not feature a fully healthy Travis Kelce could be a big hit to this offense, even with Patrick Mahomes at the helm. So I kind of had to go over the injury report first. But kind of moving off of the Chiefs injury report, let's kind of talk about what the Chiefs did in Week 1 and kind of where I see this team at as of right now, kind of going into Week 2. So Week 1 versus the Detroit Lions, I've already talked about Patrick Mahomes and company losing that game. But Mahomes, honestly, in totality, put together a very good game. Maybe not a Patrick Mahomes standard type of game, but when you talk about all the drops and all of the opportunities that a lot of Chiefs wide receivers miss, and most notably Kadarius Toney for the Kansas City offense and Patrick Mahomes, I thought overall he put together a very good game. 21 of 39, 226 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. That pick six that Brian Branch took to the house, like I said, that's not on Patrick Mahomes. And overall, Patrick Mahomes had 45 yards on the ground as well too. Rushing, Isaiah Pacheco, 8 carries for 23 yards. He didn't really get a lot of help from his skill position guys. Guys like Noah Gray, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, who Sky Moore didn't even have a catch in that game. The Chiefs' offensive skill position players, especially if they get Travis Kelce, they're going to play better in week 2. It's inevitable when you have Andy Reid at the helm and you've got Patrick Mahomes there presenting what he presents to any NFL defense going up against him. So I obviously got to give them their respects. And then defensively speaking for the Kansas City Chiefs, I thought for a team that did not have Chris Jones, I thought that they put together a very good game versus a very potent Detroit Lions offense, and especially when you talk about the fact that David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs really didn't have too big of an overall impact, at least in the rushing department, even though they combined for over 100 yards rushing. I thought this Detroit Lions team was going to absolutely run the ball down Kansas City's throat, and Kansas City's defense did a very good job missing their best defensive player in Chris Jones, and they held their own. They limited the Detroit Lions offense to only 14 points because if you take away that pick six that Brian Branch had, Jared Goff and company only put together 14 points offensively speaking in that week 1 performance. So I got to give a lot of credit to that Kansas City Chiefs defense, especially without Chris Jones. Any kind of impact that they can get from him or Travis Kelce coming back to this team is going to be vital for the success of this Kansas City Chiefs team going into week 2. And I got to say too, the Kansas City Chiefs defense got absolutely torn up in a lot of those mesh concepts where the receivers were running across the side of the field. Jared Goff did a great job pre-snap, making sure guys were into man coverage, seeing where his mismatches were going to be, and kind of identifying the weak spots in those defensive schemes. When I went back and watched the tape, man, Trevor Lawrence in this offense is going to do a lot of great things over the middle of the field, really kind of between the hashes, and that's exactly where I see this Jaguars team really attacking this Kansas City defense, which is what kind of leads me into talking about the Jaguars. And the Jaguars, they came off of a big week 1 win, beating an AFC South opponent in the Indianapolis Colts. Even though it looked like the Jaguars were kind of dead in the water in the 4th quarter, they were down 17-21 in that 4th quarter to Anthony Richardson and company. Great teams find a way to win no matter the circumstances, and the Jaguars are clearly a very great team and one of the perennial AFC contenders this upcoming season. They end up pulling away on the Indianapolis Colts in week 1, winning that game 31-21, and the Jaguars are now looking to build on the momentum at their season home opener. And now I see the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence and company putting together an extremely dominant performance overall, at least from the offensive side of the ball, when you talk about going up against this Kansas City Chiefs defense. Regardless if Honey Badger is there, regardless if Ladarius Sneed and Chris Jones are there, I expect an MVP, almost like a coming out performance yet again this season for Trevor Lawrence and company in week 2, right? We saw Calvin Ridley, 8 catches, over 100 yards receiving in his Jaguars debut and a touchdown. Christian Kirk was extremely quiet, but you still got great production from Travis Etienne, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. The Jaguars are able to spread the ball all over the field in a Chiefs secondary that is not all that talented overall, even though they do have some nice pieces. I expect Trevor Lawrence to go out there in week 2 and to really throw the ball all over the field because, like I said, when I went back and watched that tape from the week 1 performance of the Lions and the Chiefs, I think schematically what the Lions did to attack the Chiefs offense, the Jaguars have way more firepower, and I trust Trevor Lawrence a lot more than I trust Jared Goff and company to really go out there and produce in a matchup versus this Chiefs defense. And outside of just Trevor Lawrence in this passing game, I expect a big time game from Travis Etienne. He's obviously one of the most explosive and dynamic playmakers that this Jaguars team features. And regardless if Chris Jones is there or not, which obviously he makes a huge difference to that Chiefs front seven and that Chiefs defense as a whole, right? Travis Etienne, I expect him to have a big game. I expect the Jaguars to absolutely run the ball down their throats when they get the lead and maintain the lead in order to chew the clock, in order to keep the ball in the time of possession in the Jaguars' hands. I expect Travis Etienne to have a very big game alongside Trevor Lawrence because I think schematically speaking, they're going to be able to take advantage of a lot of that Chiefs secondary. Now kind of moving into the Jaguars defense, they had a hell of a performance in week 1 versus a rookie quarterback in Anthony Richardson. The Jaguars, I believe, had 3 takeaways defensively speaking. Josh Allen put together a career-high 3 sacks, and overall, this defense really came together. You could see that there was a lot of chemistry and continuity from the previous year, with a lot of the starters remaining there intact and also being in a second year under Mike Caldwell. I think when you look at how great the Jaguars defense played, considering the circumstances on the Kansas City Chiefs last season in the regular season and in the postseason, you've got to think that there's going to be a lot more chemistry and a lot more confidence for this Jaguars defense going into this matchup, being a lot more familiar with Patrick Mahomes and this offense, a lot more of their tactics and what they really like to do and how they can really limit and prevent that. When you look at the fact that the Jaguars defense did a relatively good job on the Chiefs, at least to the best of their ability, with a high explosive offense that the Chiefs present. So I expect big things from this Jaguars front 7. I expect them to get after Patrick Mahomes. Even if they don't bring him down 3 or 4 times in this game, I expect Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, and the rest of that front 7 to continuously put pressure on Patrick Mahomes, make him throw a lot of ill-advised throws, and even the Patrick Mahomes ill-advised throws are still incredibly great. Expect this Jaguars defense to go out there at home, locking down the bank, with an electric crowd and a rowdy environment to go out there and to really make life a living hell for Patrick Mahomes and company. Now, kind of getting into my final thoughts and verdicts with this game, I didn't mention it earlier, but the Chiefs are favored to win this matchup in week 2. The spread's at 3.5, so give me the Jaguars to cover this game. I like the Jaguars to cover the spread, and I also like the Jaguars to actually go ahead and win this game. I think the Jaguars offense has an extremely potent and dynamic offense, and they're going to go out there and they're going to put a lot of points up on the board. Kind of giving an actual score prediction, I think the Jaguars go out there and they win this game in a relatively convincing fashion versus one of the perennial AFC contenders year in and year out. The Jaguars are going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in week 2, 35-24. I expect Trevor Lawrence to go out there and throw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns total. I expect Travis Etienne to have a big game, at least over 100 yards scrimmage-wise, and at least another touchdown for Etienne in back-to-back weeks. I expect this Jaguars offense to go out there and do some extremely great things versus this Chiefs secondary as a whole. And regardless if Travis Kelce or Chris Jones is there, which I expect these guys to be there, even though these guys are still really getting ramped up, expect this Jaguars team to go out there and put together a very convincing performance versus Patrick Mahomes and company. I think Kadarius Toney has a huge bounce back week. I think he really carves up our defense in a week 2 performance. I think the Kansas City Chiefs believe in him a lot, and obviously he was a critical part to the Chiefs' success, especially in that Super Bowl. He caught a touchdown. He obviously had a huge punt return that really swinged a lot of the momentum in the Chiefs' favor. I expect Kadarius Toney and I expect Patrick Mahomes to have a big week 2 performance, but it's not going to be enough in Jacksonville in a week 2 matchup to go ahead and beat the Jaguars. But Chiefs fans and Jaguar fans, I want to know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you guys make of this matchup? And I also want you guys to go ahead and give me a score prediction down below. Like I said, I have the Jaguars winning this matchup in week 2, 35-24. I like the Jaguars to cover the spread, and I like the Jaguars to go out there with a high-powered offense and to put a lot of points on the board. They're going to put a lot of pressure on Patrick Mahomes and company to keep up with them, and obviously they're very capable of it. But I like the Jaguars to go ahead and win this game in week 2 in a huge performance by Trevor Lawrence and this offense. But Jags fans and Chiefs fans, if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys go ahead and drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me in the channel out tremendously. If you guys are also new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. And make sure you guys also go ahead and follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below, so you guys can go ahead and check that out. But Jags fans, thanks again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ. I'm out, y'all. Go Jags, baby. Duval. Oh, last thing. The West Side finna go crazy